Welcome to another Mia's Bookshelf video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about my top 12 favorite books of the year. This is about the 20th time I've tried to record this, so hopefully this time it's actually smooth. But before we get into my top books and some of my 2023 TBR, some of my 2023 TBR, I wanted to give a quick summary of how I organized everything. So throughout the year, as I read each book, I just added it to my GoodReads with a starred rating, sometimes an actual review accompanying it, but most of the time it was just a rating. And then a few weeks ago, I went back through and reviewed all the books that I read and then picked out my top ones from the top rated ones from each month. I also tried to not include any rereads, but there were some months where I did because the reading was just really slow that month. Our first book is for January, obviously, and it's The Storyteller by Katherine Williams. I really enjoyed this book. It is an Anastasia retelling, and it follows this girl as she finds these diaries in her grandma's attic because she's doing a history project for her senior project, and she finds these diaries in her grandma's attic, as I said, and they're her great aunts who no one really knows anything about. She was very reclusive her whole life, but as she's reading them, the girl realizes, hey, my great aunt might be the lost princess Anastasia. And so she meets with this Russian tutor who translates the books for her, who translates the journals because they're all written in Russian. And as they go through, they try to figure out if her great aunt is really Anastasia or not. But I really enjoyed the focus on others' perceptions of you, I guess, and how that tied into both Anna's story and the girls. I can't remember her name. But yeah, this was an early 2022 release. My February book was The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. I really enjoyed this because of its layout. It's a Hercule Poirot. I don't know how to say that in the proper French pronunciation, so you'll just have to go with that. But it is laid out alphabetically, as the name might suggest. But yeah, it was really good. I really enjoy mysteries, so whenever I read a good one, I always put it on my list, and that was one of them. My goal is to read all of the Agatha Christie Hercule Poirot novels within like 3 years, so I didn't read very many last year, but I'm hoping to this year. My book for March was I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. This is, I believe, what is called an epistolary novel, where the book is told primarily through letters or a diary format. This one was told through a diary format. It's about this girl, Cassandra, who is 17, and she decides to chronicle her life in this like rundown, decrepit castle, good vocab word there, as a writing exercise as she prepares to write a book following in the footsteps of her father, who was a famous author but then became very reclusive and has not published another book since then. So it's about she and her sister as they live in this rundown sisters. I believe there's only one sister. She might have a younger sister too. And her, oh my gosh, I don't remember if she has a brother or not. This is incredibly painful. I'm sorry about that. But it's a really good coming of age story about her falling in love for the first time and also falling in love with writing and telling stories. So it was really good storytelling, and I really enjoyed this. My book for April was in fact a reread. It was The Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. This is only the second time I've read this, but I really enjoyed it. I did not enjoy the original Shadowhunter series, the City of Bones series, or Mortal Instruments, actually. But I really love the Infernal Devices. I love Tessa and Will and Jem and their story. So yeah, this book is really good. It's so sad, especially if you get emotionally connected to characters. This one might mess you up for a couple days. But there's some really good lines, and I enjoyed annotating it. Tessa is a reader, so a primary focus of this book is the books that Tessa reads and the impact they've had on her. For May, I did not have any favorite books. May was a really slow month. I don't remember what I did, but for some reason I just didn't read any books that month. For June, my favorite book was The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I read and I enjoyed To All the Boys I've Loved Before, but I enjoy Belly more. I really like the story. I did read this because I wanted to watch the Prime show, but I wanted to read the book first, because I'm very stubborn and always have to read the book before the movie or show, just so I can get like my first impressions of the characters without it being inspired by the show, I think. I still have not actually watched the show, but I have read the first 2 books. So this was really good. I really enjoyed Belly. It was kind of similar to We Were Liars because it's set at the beach and it kind of switches back and forth between different summers of Belly's life, similarly to how We Were Liars does, but it's not depressing. So my favorite book of July was Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. I tried to read the Realmbreaker series, but I didn't really enjoy it. However, I did enjoy Realmbreaker, I think because this is, not Victoria Aveyard's first novel, and so she's been able to kind of get into the flow of writing and storytelling a bit more. And this one was a bit more high fantasy, so there's more like world building and exploration of, oh gosh, okay, all that. And Red Queen it felt kind of dystopian but also kind of fantasy, so it was really interesting. But Realmbreaker was really good. I
do have this problem though, where I associate books I've read with the trips I read them on. So since I read Realmbreaker on a big trip, I associate that book with the trip. How many times can I say trip in one sentence? So I have not picked up Bladebreaker yet, simply because I know I'm going to have trouble reading it because I associate Realmbreaker with the trip and the experiences on it, and I know Bladebreaker isn't going to have those same circumstances surrounding it, so I'm going to have trouble getting into it.
For August, my favorite book was A Far Wilder Magic by Allison. I don't remember her last name. I really like the story because of kind of the light academia vibes, and the world. It's set in kind of like 1920s or 1920s equivalent in a world that's still very modern and realistic, but also blends with the fantasy. It's about this girl, I believe her name is Hazel. I'm filming this on my phone, so I can't check. And she wants to become an alchemist like her mother, Evelyn, but her mother's very reclusive. There's a theme with reclusive parents, I notice in these books. Oh well. And so she's trying to teach herself to become an alchemist, but she's not having very much success until this mythical creature appears and in her town, and so there's a big hunt surrounding it. So she decides to team up with this boy who came into town looking for her mother, and he agrees to team up with her on the condition that she will make sure her mother gives him an apprenticeship. And they're both kind of outcasts in their town. Because he's an immigrant of a not favored group, or from a not favored group, and she because her mother is weird. So they team up and obviously, of course, fall in love and all that, but it's also not very romance-centered, which I did appreciate. I do like romance books, but it's also sometimes nice to not read them. For September, my favorite book was Belladonna. I really enjoyed this. It's dark academia gothic kind of storytelling along with mystery, and it's about this girl whose fate has always been very closely intertwined with death. Everyone who's ever taken her into her home for an extended period of time ends up dying. So her last caretaker dies and she is shipped off to another eccentric, odd relative. So as she's there, she discovers that death has also been very close to this household, and so she uses her connection to explore the house undetected and figure out what's going on. Through that, she also falls in love with one of the servants at the house, and then also death, and so she's trying to reconcile those. It's definitely a little sketchy content-wise, kind of in the second half of the book. So I'd say probably PG-13. For October, my favorite book was The Mark of Athena by Rick Riordan. I have been rereading the Percy Jackson series in anticipation for the show, which I don't believe is going to come out until 2024 now, which is slightly upsetting. But I was reading it thinking it would come out in summer of 2023. So I'm also reading The Heroes of Olympus because Mark of Athena is a Heroes of Olympus book. It is the third book in the series, and I really enjoy it because it still feels reminiscent of Percy Jackson without being the same stories, and it's more young adults. So Percy's not in middle school anymore, and neither are the main characters, which is really nice. For November, my top book was Emily of Deep Valley, which is written by Maud Hart Lovelace, who wrote the Betsy Tacy books. These are very underrated, in my opinion. I first heard of these because of the Mother-Daughter Book Club series, and then I picked them up to read them on my own and really enjoyed them. But Emily of Deep Valley is kind of a continuation of the books. It doesn't focus on Betsy or Tacy or Tib, but it does center around this other girl, Emily, who lives in the same town as them, as she kind of takes a step back from her primary education at school and college and focuses on taking care of her grandpa. So it's kind of about her trying to create a new life and purpose for herself while everyone that she knows is at college. So I really enjoyed this as someone who is taking a gap year and stayed at home. Yeah, it's a very sweet, cozy read, and I read it in a day. It's very quick, very short. Would recommend. My December book was Queen of Shadows, another reread. But I really enjoyed the Throne of Glass series, especially in the later books, as we get more of Selena's internal dialogue, and follow her as she learns and grows more and more. 2023 TBR. One book that I'm currently reading is Emma by Jane Austen. I have only ever read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which I think is funny because a lot of people just kind of assume that I've read all the Jane Austen books because I love Pride and Prejudice so much. But no, this will be my second Jane Austen book that I've read and finished. I picked this one up previously, but I had trouble getting into the story because I just so strongly dislike Emma. Anyway, which is, I guess, refreshing in a way because most characters are written to get you to like them, but you are not necessarily meant to like Emma as much as you do other traditional protagonists. So I'm currently 15 pages into this, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm trying to read it more for the structure and to get writing tips out of it versus reading it for the plot, because I've heard that this is Jane Austen's best, most well-crafted novel and has the best storytelling, narration. Oh, and it's the best example of, I believe it's called free indirect discourse, which is when, to my understanding, the author portrays the character's thoughts through narration versus telling us, Emma was thinking about this. So it's still told from third-person point of view, but also interjects the character's thoughts into it, into the narration. So very interesting. I'm enjoying it so far. The next is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Again, I've heard this is a really well-written book, so I'm excited to read it. I'm trying to read more literary fiction this year, and I believe this one is considered a modern classic. So I'm hoping to read this. It's been on my TBR for a while. I've had this since October and just haven't read it. Next book is the Mirror Visitor series. I started reading this book in March, but again, with the kind of I associate books with the trips thing, I have not picked this book up since I got home from my trip almost a year ago, because I associate this with New York and I don't know, that trip in particular. So I've just had trouble getting back into it, but I do really like both of the characters, and the world building in this is super cool. Really good so far. Next is Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein. I have read, I think, most of her books. The only one I haven't read is the White Dove one, but I have read the Codebreaker book. I don't think that's what it's called. The Pearl Thief book and Rose Under Fire, which all have crossover characters, and I really like when authors do that, when you see like, oh, that character was in that book or whatever. So the Pearl Thief is the prequel novel to the Codename Verity, and I really enjoyed that. And I've also really enjoyed Rose Under Fire, which is about this girl who is a Women's Auxiliary Air Force pilot, or WAAF. So she is an American who actually lives in England, and works for the English as like a transport pilot. So she can't fly into enemy territory, but she accidentally gets shot down one day and lands in enemy territory and is captured by the Germans and taken to Ravensbrück. And so it's a diary about her time there, and everything that happened to her there. So I'm really excited to read Codename Verity. I think it's also sort of a book that's told by an unreliable narrator, because the girl whose codename is Verity, shocking, is forced to either tell everything she knows about English operations in World War II or be executed, and so she chooses to betray her country instead. But I don't think her account is entirely accurate, and so you have to piece through what is true, what's she lying about, things like that. Finally, more Agatha Christie. I really enjoy her, and so I would like to read And Then There Were None by her. I watched the BBC miniseries last November of 2021, and really enjoyed it, so I'm hoping to read this year, now that I have a better grasp of the story and what's going on, and I can be prepared for how dark it is. Those were all of my 2022 favorite books and 2023 TBR. So I hope you enjoyed it, and please let me know if any of these books are also on your TBR, if you read any of these in the past year, or if you want to add any of these to your TBR now that you watch this. I upload once a week, so if you like this video, please subscribe and stay tuned for more videos. Bye!